I've always had a deep-seated curiosity about abandoned places, particularly those that are steeped in mysterious and terrifying stories. There's something about those forgotten corners of the world that seems to tell tales of past tragedies and joys, drawing me in and igniting a desire to explore. When I first heard about a town called Haverford, which had been abandoned due to an unresolved tragedy, a bold and adventurous idea sparked in my mind: to venture there and uncover the buried history that lay within its desolate streets. This town was forced to close down 40 years ago because of a terrible epidemic that swept through its population. People left in a hurry, abandoning their homes and lives overnight, leaving behind only empty streets and dusty memories. The traces of once thriving shops and families still lingered in the air, as if they were whispering unknown stories to the outside world, begging to be heard. I had even heard that some places still bore the marks of people's hurried departures, as if time had come to a standstill in this ghostly town. So, I decided to invite my friend Catherine to join me in exploring this eerie place. Our plan was simple yet ambitious: to delve into this time-forgotten town and search for the secrets hidden in the shadows, trying to piece together its mysterious past. As we drove toward Haverford, the scenery around us gradually became obscured by dense woods that seemed to close in on the road. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling as if whispering secrets to one another, and a sense of unease crept into my heart. Yet I was incredibly excited about the discoveries that awaited us in this forsaken place. Finally, our car crossed the town's borders, revealing a haunting landscape of nearly collapsed houses and streets overgrown with weeds and wild grasses. Everything here felt eerily silent, as if the air was thick with an indescribable fear that sent chills down my spine, making it hard to breathe. We parked in the town center, stepping onto the weed-choked streets that were surrounded by dilapidated and dim buildings, their walls marked by the relentless passage of time. Catherine seemed a bit anxious, her eyes darting around as if she could feel something watching us, heightening the tension in the air. We passed a leaning house that looked as though it might topple over at any moment and entered an abandoned shop. Inside, the shelves were filled with dusty old items, remnants of a life once vibrant and full of energy. I curiously sifted through the remnants, imagining the once thriving scene that had unfolded here, as if I could almost hear the echoes of laughter ringing in my ears, a haunting reminder of what once was. Just as I was getting lost in the history of this place, Catherine suddenly called me in a low, urgent voice. She pointed outside to a rundown amusement park, where the carousel still swayed gently in the breeze, as if beckoning us and telling its own story of lost joy. We decided to head toward the amusement park, a place where lost joy and terror intertwined, creating a strange atmosphere that made us both eager yet apprehensive about what we might find. Standing at the entrance of the amusement park, my heart began to race, a mix of excitement and fear overwhelming me. Everything inside looked desolate, the faded colors and rusty equipment painting a grim picture of a place stripped of its former life. We wandered among the empty rides, occasionally hearing the wind's mournful wail and faint, unknown sounds that seemed to echo the lively fun that once filled this place, now replaced by an eerie silence. In the center of the park, we discovered an abandoned haunted house. The door hung precariously on its hinges, like a grotesque monster waiting for prey to stumble in. Catherine appeared even more nervous now, her face etched with worry and fear, but I was driven by a strong curiosity that compelled me to push the door open. We stepped into the darkness, the narrow passage feeling suffocating and claustrophobic, and the graffiti on the walls seemed to tell untold stories that sent shivers down my spine, as if the walls themselves were alive with memories. In a corner, I spotted an old doll, its face still bearing an eerie smile, as if it were waving at me from the shadows. As I reached out to touch the dust-covered doll, a low whisper suddenly came from behind us. We froze, quickly turning around, but all we saw was damp darkness, as if something sinister was lurking just out of sight, watching us with malevolent intent. "Let's go. We need to leave," Catherine said, her voice trembling and clearly on edge. I understood her feelings. but my curiosity pushed me to explore further, to uncover the secrets that lay hidden in this haunted place. We continued wandering through the haunted house until we came across a half-open door. Strange noises emanated from behind it, as if something was struggling within, sending chills down our spines and heightening our fear. We exchanged glances filled with dread, both of us knowing that we were teetering on the edge of something terrifying. Catherine nearly pulled me away, but I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The sight before me was shocking. A corpse lay on the ground, ragged and with a twisted expression, as if shrouded in immense fear and despair. My heart sank instantly, wishing I could escape this place, fleeing from the suffocating terror that enveloped us. "Quick, get out of here!" Catherine screamed, pulling my hand back with urgency. At that moment, I noticed a shadow flash behind us. It wasn't an ordinary shadow. It moved quickly and eerily, almost as if it were alive, a dark entity that sent a wave of despair washing over me. My heart nearly stopped at the sight, overwhelmed by the fear that threatened to consume us. We raced out of the haunted house, heading for the amusement park's exit, our hearts pounding in our chests. The atmosphere in the abandoned park grew increasingly bizarre and oppressive. We felt as if countless eyes were watching us from the darkness, making it hard to breathe and fueling our panic. We ran back to the car, only to find the keys missing. At that moment, my heart felt like it was gripped by cold hands, and despair surged unexpectedly, as if everything had become utterly hopeless. "We need to split up and search," I said loudly, trying to calm myself, but even saying that couldn't hide the inner fear that gnawed at me. We decided to separate to look for the keys, with Catherine running toward a massive, gnarled tree while I searched the park's perimeter, anxiety and unease filling my mind like a heavy fog. In a state of indescribable fear, I checked every corner and crevice, and just as I was about to give up hope, I found the keys among a pile of junk and debris. A rush of joy surged through me as I sprinted toward Catherine, feeling a glimmer of hope in the midst of our terror. However, when I reached that tree, the scene before me sent chills down my spine. Catherine was slumped on the ground, her face pale and eyes vacant, low whispers echoing around her like a sinister lullaby. I called her name desperately, but there was no response. My heart sank as I realized something terrifying was happening, as if she were being enchanted or controlled by something dark. I approached her cautiously, trying to wake her up, but she seemed trapped in a trance, her gaze distant and unfocused. I saw the shadow behind her, seemingly drawing something from her, feeding on her very essence. Despair hit me again, and I shook her hard, finally bringing her gaze back to me, as if she had just awakened from a nightmarish dream. "Run! It's coming!" Her voice trembled, sounding as if she had just emerged from a horrific nightmare. We didn't hesitate any longer. We bolted toward the car, filled with fear and urgency, adrenaline coursing through our veins. Just as we were almost at the car, that shadow suddenly appeared behind us, its shape vague and twisted, like a ghost wandering the earth, hungry for our fear. I unlocked the car door, yanked Catherine inside, and we hurriedly climbed in. As the engine roared to life, we sped away from the amusement park, finally feeling a bit of relief as that terrifying shadow disappeared from the rearview mirror, swallowed by the darkness behind us. We drove in silence, the wind howling outside the car windows, as if telling the sorrowful story of this town. I didn't dare to think back on what we had just experienced, my heart filled with fear and confusion. We left Haverford behind, but those shadows were deeply etched in my memory, making it impossible to sleep at night, unable to shake off that unsettling feeling that clung to me like a heavy shroud. After returning to the city, I thought everything was over, that we had escaped the horrors of Haverford. However, a few nights later, I dreamed of that shadow again, and in my dream, Catherine's face was filled with terror and despair, a haunting image that would not leave me. I woke up in a cold sweat, fully aware that the shadow of Haverford would forever follow me, a dark reminder of our encounter. I understood that some secrets can never be uncovered, and some experiences cannot be forgotten, deeply imprinted in my soul, becoming a nightmare I could never escape, haunting my thoughts and dreams with unrelenting persistence. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was an unbearably sweltering summer day when my family and I made the decision to visit my Uncle Harold, who was affectionately known as Crazy Harold by everyone in the family. He lived on a sprawling, rustic farm nestled deep in the heart of West Virginia, surrounded by thick, dense woods and fields that stretched endlessly as far as the eye could see. The air was heavy with humidity, thick enough to feel like a blanket draped over us, and the sun hung low in the sky, casting long, sinister shadows that danced ominously across the landscape, creating an unsettling atmosphere that I could feel in my bones. As we arrived at the farm, I was struck by the eerie stillness that enveloped the entire property. The only sounds that broke the silence were the distant chirping of cicadas and the gentle rustling of leaves in the warm breeze. My younger siblings, Emma and Jake, were bursting with energy, eagerly bounding out of the car, their excitement palpable as they rushed to explore the vast expanse of land that lay before us. I, however, felt an unsettling sense of dread wash over me as my eyes caught sight of the scarecrow standing guard in the nearest field, its presence looming ominously in the background. It was an odd-looking figure, constructed from tattered clothes that had been stuffed with straw, giving it a disheveled appearance. Its face was a burlap sack, crudely stitched with two button eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went, regardless of where I stood. I shivered involuntarily, feeling as if it were alive, watching me with a sinister intent hidden beneath its stitched features. "It's just a scarecrow," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in my stomach. But deep down, I knew that something was off about it, something that made my skin crawl and my heart race. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, the shadows grew longer, and the airs turned cooler, creating an atmosphere of foreboding that hung over the farm like a thick fog. Uncle Harold welcomed us with his usual boisterous laughter, a sound that had always filled me with warmth, but this time there was a strange glint in his eyes that made me uneasy. He regaled us with stories of the farm, tales of his adventures and misadventures, but I couldn't shake my fixation on the scarecrow. I found myself glancing out the window repeatedly, watching as the last rays of sunlight illuminated its grotesque form, casting an even darker shadow across the ground. That night, after a hearty dinner filled with laughter and stories, we gathered around the fire pit outside. The flames crackled and popped, casting flickering shadows that danced across our faces, creating an almost surreal ambience. Uncle Harold told us ghost stories, his voice low and conspiratorial, weaving tales that sent shivers down our spines. But my mind kept drifting back to the scarecrow, the image of its lifeless face haunting me. I felt a chill run down my spine as I imagined it coming to life, its straw limbs reaching out for me in the darkness. As darkness enveloped the farm, I suggested we head inside, my voice tinged with urgency. Emma and Jake protested, wanting to stay up longer to enjoy the warmth of the fire, but I was insistent. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the fields, lurking just out of sight. Reluctantly, they followed me into the house, their faces still lit with the excitement of the evening. We settled into our rooms, but sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the night, every creak of the house amplifying my growing anxiety. Hours later, I was jolted awake by a loud thud outside that shattered the stillness of the night. My heart raced as I sat up, straining to hear. It came again, a heavy sound, followed by a rustling noise that sent a jolt of fear through me. I glanced at the window, and my blood ran cold. The scarecrow was gone. Panic surged through me, and I shook Emma awake, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did you hear that?" I asked urgently. She groaned and rolled over, clearly still lost in sleep, but Jake was already sitting up, wide-eyed and terrified. "Where's the scarecrow?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. I didn't have an answer, but the fear in my gut told me we needed to find it, to understand what was happening. We crept out of our room, the wooden floorboards creaking ominously beneath our feet as we moved cautiously. The house was dark, save for the faint glow of the moon filtering through the windows, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. I led the way, my heart pounding in my chest as we stepped outside into the cool night air, which sent shivers down my spine. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in around us, thickening the air and heightening my senses. As we ventured into the yard, the thudding noise grew louder, echoing in the stillness of the night. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the house, but curiosity propelled us forward, urging us to uncover the source of the sound. We approached the field, and the sight that met us sent a jolt of terror through my veins, freezing me in place. The scarecrow stood at the edge of the field, but it was different. The straw was scattered around its feet, and its head had turned, facing us directly with an unsettling intensity. The button eyes glinted in the moonlight, and I could have sworn it was smiling, a wicked grin that sent chills down my spine. "It's just the wind," I whispered, trying to convince myself that there was a rational explanation for what we were witnessing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the field, sending a chill down my spine that felt like icy fingers brushing against my skin. The scarecrow swayed unnaturally in the wind, and I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape the malevolent presence that seemed to radiate from it. "We need to go back," I hissed, grabbing Emma's hand tightly. But before we could turn, the scarecrow lurched forward, its straw arms outstretched as if reaching for us, beckoning us closer. I screamed, a sound of pure terror escaping my lips, and we bolted back toward the house, our hearts racing. The thudding sound followed us, growing louder with every frantic step we took. I could hear the rustling of straw behind us, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night, and the air felt thick with dread, pressing down on us like a heavy weight. We burst through the door, slamming it shut behind us, our breaths coming in frantic gasps as we leaned against the door, trying to catch our breath. "What was that?" Emma cried, her eyes wide with fear, glistening in the dim light of the living room. "It's just a scarecrow," I insisted, though I could feel the tremor in my voice betraying my own fear. "It can't hurt us." But deep down, I knew I was lying to both her and myself. The fear that had gripped me earlier had morphed into a primal instinct to survive, to protect my siblings from whatever malevolent force lurked outside. We huddled together in the living room, listening intently for any signs of the scarecrow's approach, the night feeling endless and oppressive. Each creak of the house amplified our terror, echoing in the silence like a haunting reminder of our vulnerability. As the hours dragged on, we finally dared to peek outside, our hearts pounding in our chests. The field lay still under the moonlight, the scarecrow now just a shadowy figure in the distance, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for us, biding its time, ready to strike when we least expected it. Morning light eventually broke, casting a warm glow over the farm and dispelling the darkness that had haunted us through the night. The world felt different in the daylight, vibrant and alive, yet the memory of the previous night lingered like a dark cloud hanging over us. Uncle Harold found us huddled together in the living room, our faces pale and drawn, the remnants of fear etched into our features. "What happened?" he asked, concern etched on his face, his brow furrowing as he took in our frightened expressions. I recounted our harrowing night, detailing every chilling moment, but he merely chuckled, shaking his head dismissively. "You kids and your imaginations. It's just a scarecrow." But I could see the flicker of something in his eyes. Was it fear? Or perhaps something darker that he was unwilling to admit? I couldn't tell, but the unease lingered, a shadow lurking in the corners of my mind. We spent the day trying to shake off the events of the night, engaging in playful activities and enjoying the sunshine, but I couldn't help but feel a lingering dread gnawing at my insides. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, I found myself drawn to the window again. The scarecrow stood in the field, its presence looming over us like a dark omen, a reminder of the terror that had gripped us just hours before. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The fear had returned, gnawing at my insides like a relentless predator. I lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the night, but this time, I was prepared. I had a plan. I would face the scarecrow, confront the fears that had haunted me for so long. As the clock struck midnight, I quietly slipped out of bed, determined to confront my fear head-on. I crept through the house, careful not to wake my siblings or Uncle Harold, my heart pounding in my chest as I moved. The cool air hit me as I stepped outside, and I shivered, but I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. I approached the field, the moonlight illuminating the scarecrow in all its grotesque glory, its form casting an elongated shadow across the ground. It stood there, motionless, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "You're just a pile of straw," I whispered, trying to summon the courage I desperately needed. But as I stepped closer, the scarecrow seemed to shift, its form becoming more defined in the moonlight, almost as if it were alive. It was no longer just a figure, it felt as if it were breathing, waiting for me to make a move. I felt a surge of panic, but I couldn't turn back now, I had come too far. "Leave us alone!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the stillness of the night, breaking the silence that enveloped the farm. The scarecrow didn't respond, but I could feel the air grow heavy with tension, thickening around me like a shroud. Suddenly, it lunged forward, moving with an unnatural speed that sent my heart racing. I stumbled back, fear coursing through my veins as I turned to run. I dashed toward the house, the sound of rustling straw behind me growing louder, echoing in my ears like a death knell. I could feel its presence closing in, the thudding noise reverberating through the air as I reached the door. I flung it open, slamming it shut just in time to block whatever horror was chasing me. Breathless and trembling, I leaned against the door, trying to calm my racing heart, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. But the fear had taken root deep within me, and I knew I couldn't stay at the farm any longer. I had to get away from the scarecrow, from whatever dark force it represented, whatever malevolent spirit had taken hold of my imagination. The next morning, I gathered my siblings and told them we were leaving, my voice firm and resolute. Uncle Harold tried to convince us to stay, offering more stories and adventures, but I was adamant, my resolve unshakable. We packed our bags, each item feeling heavier than the last, and left the farm behind, the scarecrow's figure fading into the distance as we drove away. As we drove away, I glanced back at the fields, the sun shining brightly, illuminating the world in a golden hue. But even in the daylight, I could feel the weight of the scarecrow's gaze upon me, a haunting reminder of the terror that lurked just beyond the safety of our home. It haunted my thoughts, a specter of fear that lingered in the corners of my mind, refusing to let go. Years later, I would often think back to that summer, to the scarecrow that had haunted my childhood and left an indelible mark on my psyche. It became a symbol of my fears, a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the corners of our minds, waiting to pounce when we least expect it. I learned that fear can take many forms, and sometimes, it's not the monsters we see that are the most terrifying, but the ones that linger in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And even now, as an adult, I find myself glancing at fields with scarecrows, a chill creeping down my spine at the sight of those inanimate figures. I can't help but wonder if they're truly just piles of straw or if they hold a darker secret, a connection to the fears that shaped my childhood and continue to echo in my mind. The memory of that summer lingers, a haunting reminder of the scarecrow's shadow that will forever remain etched in my soul, a chilling testament to the power of fear and the darkness that can reside in even the most innocent of forms. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was a sultry morning, thick with humidity, when I embarked on a journey that would haunt my memories for the entirety of my life. I had heard whispers of hope and opportunity waiting in the United States, a land where dreams could be woven into reality. Far removed from the despair that had gripped my homeland for so long. Little did I know that the path to that elusive future would lead me through the heart of one of the deadliest jungles on Earth, the Darien. A place where nature's ferocity was rivaled only by the darkness that lurked within the hearts of men. The thought of what lay ahead filled me with trepidation, yet the promise of a better life pushed me forward. As we gathered at the edge of the jungle, the atmosphere thrummed with palpable anxiety and tension. There were 15 of us, immigrants hailing from various corners of Central America, all united by a common desire to escape our dire circumstances and seek a new beginning. A man named Carlos, a seasoned guide who had traversed the jungle more times than he could count, stood before us. His presence both reassuring and alarming. His rugged face was lined with experience, and despite the authority in his voice, I could sense the tremor of fear lurking behind his words. "Stick together," he warned us, his eyes scanning the thick foliage. "The jungle takes everything from you, your strength, your resolve, sometimes even your life. Do not underestimate its power." With that ominous reminder, we entered the thick foliage, the towering trees casting eerie shadows as the sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy above. The air was hot and humid, with the persistent buzz of insects surrounding us like a menacing choir, their incessant droning filling the silence of the jungle. Hours drifted by, time losing its meaning as we trudged deeper into the abyss, each step feeling heavier than the last. We followed Carlos closely, our hearts heavy with foreboding, acutely aware that every step we took was leading us further from safety and deeper into danger. It was on the second day of our trek that the first shattering event unfolded, a moment that would forever be etched in my memory. We had reached a narrow clearing when a sudden rustle in the bushes sent ripples of panic through our group. Before we could fully process the sound, a group of men emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by masks and their intentions clear as they brandished weapons with menacing authority. "Down!" Carlos shouted, but it was too late. The chaos erupted instantly, a whirlwind of terror that left us paralyzed in fear. Screams filled the air as the armed men lunged toward us, their movements swift and brutal. I remember seeing Juan, a wiry man who had shared dreams of a new life with me over a flickering campfire, tackled to the ground with terrifying force. I felt frozen, an onlooker to violence I had only heard about in distant stories. The men dragged him away, his desperate pleas echoing in the jungle, begging for them to stop, to let him go. He was not the last to disappear that day. Several others, too, were taken, lost in a haze of terror and brutality, swallowed by the very jungle that had promised us freedom. The remaining group, now a fragmented puzzle of fear and despair, stumbled through the jungle in shock, our minds racing with what had just transpired. Carlos, who had strived to be our anchor, could do nothing but urge us to keep moving, to put distance between ourselves and the horror that had just unfolded. But how could we? Each rustle in the underbrush felt like a shot of adrenaline coursing through our veins. Each shadow a stark reminder of what awaited us in this hellish expanse. The jungle had transformed from a place of hope into a living nightmare. Night fell, stretching the ambience into an even more terrifying realm. We huddled together, our whispers barely audible over the chorus of croaking frogs and chirping insects. Sleep was a foreign concept, our bodies exhausted but our minds racing with the horrific images that lingered in the dark corners of our thoughts. I could feel the weight of despair pressing down on my chest as I replayed the vivid scenes from earlier, unable to shake off the guilt of survival that gnawed at me. Why had I been spared while others had been taken? The following days turned into a blur of madness, our small group dwindling as more fell victim to the jungle's merciless hold. Each morning brought news of another loss, and with it, a deeper craving for survival against the gnawing sense of hopelessness that threatened to consume us. I lost track of time, the sun becoming an indifferent observer to our plight, its rays no longer a source of warmth, but a reminder of the days slipping away. On the 5th day, we stumbled into a dilapidated clearing, remnants of what appeared to be an old campsite. We dared to hope for safety, for a moment of respite. But our brief sense of relief was short-lived. That night, the jungle erupted into chaos once more. They came again, masked men. Their voices low and intimidating as they prowled through the darkness, searching for any sign of life. They were persistent, their hunger for power and control palpable in the air. In the confusion, I heard footsteps approaching my hiding place. My heart raced as I held my breath, praying fervently that they wouldn't find me, that I could remain hidden from their predatory gaze. In the dead of night, I witnessed horrors I had never imagined were possible. My heart sank with every anguished scream that pierced the quiet. Each cry a grim reminder that we were nothing more than prey to those who thrived on fear. I saw the faces of the people who had once shared laughter and hopes with me ripped away. One by one, swallowed by the jungle's insatiable hunger for despair and suffering. The jungle had become an abyss of terror, a living nightmare that threatened to consume us all. Between snatched moments of breath and trembling hands, I could feel my humanity slipping away. Desperation clawed at my insides as I fought to maintain my grip on sanity, clinging to the flicker of hope that still lay ahead. That somehow we could escape this nightmare. Despite the ever-present danger, the burning desire to escape kept me pushing forward, fueling my resolve to survive against all odds. It was on the 7th day that we, what remained of us, came across a small river. The water shimmered temptingly under the hazy light. A glimpse of freedom amidst the chaos. We waded through the cool water, desperate to wash away the stains of our ordeal, to cleanse ourselves of the horror we had witnessed. But the river held secrets, and as we emerged on the other side, I knew that danger lingered still, lurking just beyond our sight. The final stretch of our journey was nothing short of a nightmare. Malaria and hunger clawed at our bodies, weakening us further. But hope ignited our footsteps, propelling us forward. The specter of death loomed overhead, yet we managed to navigate through the relentless undergrowth. Each rustle inducing panic, each shadow a potential threat. We pressed on, driven by the faint glimmer of a future that felt just out of reach. And then, miraculously, we reached the border, a line in the sand that separated peril from promise. I remember collapsing on the ground, the weight of my fears finally breaking under the promise of safety that lay ahead. But the nightmare of the journey followed me. Shadows lurking in the corners of my mind, refusing to let go of their hold on me. As I crossed into the United States, I found myself in a world brimming with possibility, but the otherworldly horrors of the jungle clung to me like a second skin. A constant reminder of the price I had paid for freedom. Regret settled into my bones, intertwining with the memories of those lost in the depths of the Darien, their faces haunting me in my dreams. No victory felt more hollow than this. The price had been too high, and the cost of my survival weighed heavily on my conscience. Even now, I wake at night with the echoes of screams reverberating in my mind, the faces of my lost companions haunting my thoughts, their pleas for mercy echoing in the silence. Each day forward carries the burden of what I survived, but also what was taken from me in the process. The jungle taught me that hope is a fragile thing, easily swallowed by despair, and as I grapple with the memories, I know that some journeys leave scars that never heal, ones that stay embedded deep within the soul, forever marking the path I took in search of a new life. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I've always been a night owl, finding comfort and solace in the quiet solitude that the dark hours of night afford. When the world is asleep, my mind becomes more alive, attuned to the subtle nuances of silence and shadow. The night offers a unique tranquility, a chance to reflect and explore thoughts that often remain hidden during the bustling hours of daylight. In those hushed moments, I feel a connection to something larger, something that whispers secrets only the darkness can hold. The stillness of night allows me to delve into the depths of my imagination, to wander through the corridors of my mind with no distractions. So, when I landed a job as a night cleaner at an ancient church nestled squarely in the heart of the city, I relished not only the peace that accompanied it, but also the opportunity to explore a place steeped in history when no one else was around. The idea of wandering through a building that had stood for centuries, witnessing the passage of time, was thrilling. The pay, an astonishing $40 an hour, was merely the icing on the cake. Who was I, after all, to turn down such a lucrative opportunity? The chance to earn a substantial income while indulging my nocturnal tendencies seemed too good to be true. Little did I know then, the secrets harbored within those grand, stone walls were far deeper and more chilling than I could ever have imagined, ones that would ultimately chill me to the very core of my being. On my very first night, as I walked through the enormous, intricately carved doors of the church, I was immediately struck by its grandeur. The high, vaulted ceilings seemed to touch the heavens themselves, while stained glass windows depicted scenes of otherworldly beauty. These windows cast colorful patterns that danced across the floor as moonlight filtered through, creating an ethereal atmosphere that felt both sacred and mysterious. The air was redolent with the rich, earthy scent of old books, a tantalizing fragrance that emanated from the library as I moved about performing my designated tasks. This aroma seemed to whisper stories of the past, tales preserved within the pages of those ancient tomes. Each step I took seemed to echo with the footsteps of those who had walked these halls before me, each breath filled with the weight of history. But as soon as the clock's hands aligned at midnight, the atmosphere underwent a subtle yet unmistakable transformation, taking on a more sinister and foreboding tone. Shadows seemed to grow longer and deeper, swirling around as if they possessed a life of their own. The once comforting silence began to feel oppressive, as if the very walls were holding their breath. It was at that eerie hour that I first heard it, a faint, ethereal melody drifting wistfully through the ancient halls. The haunting tune seemed to emerge from the very walls themselves, played, it seemed, on a distant organ hidden somewhere out of sight. Puzzled and intrigued, I ventured towards the source of the melody, only to find the music fading away into the stone walls as if swallowed by their ancient silence. I shrugged it off, attributing the experience to the fatigue of a long day, and continued trudging through my nightly cleaning tasks. Yet, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something that beckoned me to listen more closely. The music lingered in my mind, a ghostly refrain that refused to be forgotten. But the mysterious music was tenacious, becoming a regular occurrence, each night slightly louder, slightly more insistent, as though it sought my attention. One particular evening, while I diligently polished the wooden pews, I thought I caught sight of a figure draped in long, black robes lurking just beyond my peripheral vision. My heart raced as I spun around quickly to face whatever might be there, but the sanctuary was as empty as a tomb, the silence so profound it pressed against my ears. The figure, if it had been real, vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only questions in its wake. Curiosity piqued and perhaps spurred by the unnerving encounters, I began to inquire about the church's long and storied past, directing my questions to Father Solomon, the enigmatic priest who presided over the church's affairs. Father Solomon was an imposing man, his presence almost austere, his sharp, penetrating eyes gleamed with an unreadable intensity that made one feel exposed in his gaze. His demeanor was both commanding and elusive, as if he held secrets he was unwilling to share. Yet he remained evasive, dismissing my questions with curt, dismissive answers, and offering only vague reassurances about ghosts and tales from centuries past. His words seemed to dance around the truth, never quite revealing what lay beneath the surface. However, the more he brushed off my inquiries, the more compelled I felt to uncover the truth hidden within those walls. It became an obsession, a puzzle I was determined to solve. The church, with its towering spires and shadowed corners, held a mystery I could not ignore. One particularly still and suffocatingly quiet night, I stumbled upon a strange, intricately carved blue door in the basement, a place I had never before thought to venture into, let alone clean. The basement itself was a labyrinth of forgotten relics and dusty corners, a place where time seemed to stand still. The door was locked tight, and I couldn't help but notice an unexplainable coldness that seemed to seep through the cracks around it. Driven by equal parts dread and unrelenting curiosity, I resolved to find a way inside, determined to unravel the mystery that surrounded it. The door seemed to call to me, a silent guardian to secrets untold. It was as if it held the answers to the questions that had been plaguing me, a key to the enigma that had ensnared my mind. My resolve to unravel the mystery only deepened with each passing day. I scoured the church library, peeling back the layers of time through dusty old records and fragmented documents, searching for any clue that might illuminate the enigma before me. The library was a treasure trove of knowledge, its shelves lined with books that chronicled the church's history and the lives of those who had walked its halls. It was there that I happened upon cryptic texts carefully hidden within the pages of an ancient tome. The writings within spoke of a being of light, a radiant entity trapped by dark rituals and machinations performed under the guise of holiness, of a pact sealed in blood by those who deceptively preached benevolence yet harbored sinister intentions. The words painted a picture of betrayal and hidden agendas, a history long buried beneath layers of deception. The more I read, the more the pieces began to fit together, forming a picture of a truth that was both terrifying and compelling. As another week slipped silently by and my sanity began to fray at the edges, my awareness seemed to attune itself to the pulse of unseen forces all around me. The apparitions, fleeting though they were, became more frequent, and the music transformed into a constant, unrelenting harbinger of terror. Whispers now echoed through the winding corridors, forming words that sent chills down my spine. Release us. The plea was both a command and a cry for help, reverberating through the very fabric of the church. It was as if the building itself was alive, a sentient entity crying out for liberation. It was then that, while searching for anything that might shed more light on the mystery, I discovered an aged, dust-covered key hidden beneath a loose floorboard in Father Solomon's sparsely furnished office. The office, a place of authority and secrecy, held an air of solemnity that seemed to echo the priest's own demeanor. The discovery felt like destiny, a moment that had been waiting to happen. That fateful night, as violent rain lashed against the stained glass windows, a cacophony of nature's own haunting melody, I finally descended into the depths of the basement, my heart pounding with each cautious step I took. With trembling hands that betrayed my rising fear, I inserted the key into the blue door's lock. What lay beyond defied comprehension. Chained amidst a circle of glowing, carved hieroglyphs was a creature of ethereal, breathtaking beauty, an angel, its luminous wings shimmering and reflecting the dim, eerie light of the basement. The sight was both awe-inspiring and heart-wrenching, a vision of grace and suffering intertwined. Our eyes met, and in those depths, I saw sorrow so profound and incomprehensible, so ancient and pleading, that it pierced my soul. The angel's gaze implored me to act, to grant the freedom it had been so cruelly denied. It was a moment of connection, a silent understanding that transcended words. The angel's presence was a testament to the divine and the profane, a being caught between two worlds. Understanding dawned upon me with the eerie clarity of a nightmare. Realized the church was not a sanctuary of holiness, but rather a veritable prison. Father Solomon and his acolytes were the imprisoned angels' earthly guardians, their duties burdened and tainted by unspeakable acts carried out under the disingenuous guise of spirituality. The revelation was both shocking and enlightening, a truth that shattered the illusion of sanctity. The very foundation of the church's existence was built upon lies and deceit, a facade that had concealed the darkness within. Compelled by an urge I could neither define nor resist, I released the locks that bound the angel to its prison. The church seemed to shudder, as if it possessed a life of its own, and the walls groaned in protest. Flames burst forth, seemingly from nowhere, consuming the ancient wood and stone with unyielding, ravenous ferocity. The heat was intense, the air thick with smoke. As I stumbled backward, my vision blurred by the chaos unfolding around me. The inferno was a cleansing fire, a purging of the sins that had tainted the sacred space. Amidst the chaos, the angel ascended, its form a blazing beacon against the tapestry of the night sky, a sight so glorious that it seared itself permanently into my mind's eye. The inferno raged unchecked, and in that singular moment, I understood that the church's just retribution had finally come to pass. The sins of its keepers were being purged. The price exacted was absolute. It was a cleansing, a reckoning that left nothing untouched. The church, once a symbol of faith, was now a testament to the power of truth and redemption. As the monumental structure crumbled into ash and ruin, I found myself standing alone in the cool embrace of dawn, the angel long gone, and the truth buried beneath the still smoking remnants of what once was. The world seemed different, altered by the night's events, yet eerily the same. What became of me in the time that followed, I cannot truly say. Some nights, as dreams carry me unwillingly back to that place, I still hear the whispers, the music, echoes of a past that steadfastly refused to let go. They haunt me, reminders of a reality that defied explanation. The memories linger, a constant reminder of the darkness that can hide within the light. What I had uncovered consumed the church, its flames licking greedily at the vestiges of its existence, and for better or worse, I found myself free at last. Yet, deep inside, I knew the experience had left an indelible, immutable mark on my soul. My name, my former life, all seemed to have been left behind in the midnight sanctuary, a place where echoes of the past continue to linger, forever watchful, bearing witness to truths that were both a blessing and a curse. The memories remain, a testament to the power of belief and the darkness that can hide within the light. The experience had changed me, reshaped my understanding of the world and my place within it. The church, with its secrets and its revelations, had become a part of me, a chapter in my story that would never fade. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As far back as my memory stretches, my cousin Jake was more than just a relative. He was like an integral piece of my very existence, always there, always a part of my world. We weren't merely cousins. We were like brothers, intricately woven together by a tapestry of shared experiences and mischievous escapades in our quaint, sleepy town. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and every story, no matter how implausible, spread like wildfire, becoming part of our collective consciousness. Growing up side by side, our bond was not only unshakable but also unparalleled, a connection that was as natural as breathing. Yet, it was Jake's insatiable thirst for adventure, his relentless pursuit of the extraordinary, that often guided us into the most remarkable and, at times, bizarre predicaments. Among Jake's myriad of interests, Nothing captured his keen, adventurous spirit quite like the legends and myths that seem to hover at the edges of our reality, especially those so spine-chilling that they'd make even the bravest among us shudder with fear from their terrifying whispers. Jake was completely enthralled by these stories, drawn to them with an intensity akin to a moth's fatal attraction to a flame. The tale that held the most fascination for him was that of Tall Tim, an enigmatic specter rumored to wander the decaying relics of places long forsaken by light and laughter. This looming figure supposedly haunted the shadowy, forgotten recesses of the old paper mill, his silhouette an indelible mark against the fading canvas of bygone industry and prosperity, a ghostly reminder of what once was. Jake's obsession with Tall Tim reached new heights as the summer drew near, setting the stage for what would become an unforgettable and chilling chapter of our childhoods. His desire to prove himself in front of his friends, to show them that it wasn't just talk, that he truly wasn't all bark and no bite, pushed him to hatch a plan that would draw us both into the heart of the terrifying legend. Naturally, being his closest confidant and partner in crime, I was swept along into this daring, albeit foolhardy, expedition. It was as if the very essence of adventure called to us, beckoning us to uncover the truth behind the myth. The day of our adventure arrived as any other unassuming Saturday, bright and cheery, belying the ominous undertones of our upcoming exploit. Armed with flashlights, a modest collection of snacks, and possibly faces more courageous than our pounding hearts, we plunged into the dense overgrowth that threatened to conceal the path leading to the paper mill. It was as if nature itself was conspiring to guard the secrets buried within those dilapidated walls. Each step we took announced our presence with a brittle crackling of leaves and an eerie snapping of twigs beneath our feet. The woods seemed to play a mournful symphony, marking every footfall with a whisper of what lay ahead, a foreboding melody that hinted at the mysteries we were about to unravel. Eventually, the paper mill materialized before us, a colossal and ghostly monument to a time long forgotten, standing as a sentinel of the past. Its towering smokestacks spiraled into the sky like the twisted digits of an ancient phantom striving to capture heaven itself. The entrance yawned wide, a cavernous mouth ready to engulf us in its darkness, beckoning us to step into its shadowy embrace. Despite every instinct in my gut urging me to turn back, Jake's determination was a beacon that refused to waver, pulling us ever forwards into the unknown. Once inside, the stale air clung to us like a shroud, thick with dust and the metallic scent of lingering decay, a testament to the years of neglect. Silence blanketed the vast interior, pressing in from all sides, the kind of disquiet that set your mind racing with imagined whispers lurking just beyond the visible. We moved with deliberate caution, our flashlights cutting wide arcs, casting shadows that mocked our bold intrusion with their wraith-like dance across the crumbling walls. It wasn't long until our investigative endeavor unearthed the morbid secrets concealed within the echoes of this forsaken place, secrets that would forever alter our perception of reality. Scattered about at odd intervals were the remnants of erstwhile lives, a forgotten wrench here, a ragged piece of attire there, and, beyond denial, the unmistakable specter of bones. Human bones. My stomach twisted into nauseating knots as realization clawed its way into my consciousness, assembling the macabre puzzle before us into a nightmarish scene. Jake, however, appeared curiously unfazed, his initial bravado diminishing ever so slightly as he examined the grim discoveries with an unsettling calmness, as if he were trying to piece together a puzzle that had eluded him for far too long. Then, out of the darkness came a movement that arrested our attention, my heartbeat vaulting to a frenzied pace. We froze, our flashlights snapping to the point of disturbance. There stood a figure, excessively elongated, cloaked in shadows that seemed to form a symbiotic fog around it. Was this the infamous Tall Tim brought to life, a myth materialized, or something more sinister yet? The sight of this apparition sent shivers down my spine, a visceral reaction that left me paralyzed with fear. An overwhelming tide of panic surged through my veins, and instinctively, Jake and I spun around and sprinted. The world warped into a blurred rush of chaotic images as we retraced our path, the spectral echo of footsteps mirroring our flight through the hollow, oppressive corridors. Every silent prayer, every desperate plea to whatever power might be listening, bubbled to the surface of my mind, a beacon of hope for our survival, a plea for deliverance from the nightmare we had unwittingly stepped into. Yet the whim of fate interceded with its own cruel designs. As we neared the longed-for exit, one moment Jake matched my stride, then in a terrible instant, he vanished, swallowed by the void behind me. His haunting scream fractured the air, reverberating through my very core as I staggered to an abrupt halt. Desperation seized me. I called out his name over and over, my voice crumbling into the oppressive silence that answered back, a silence that seemed to mock my futile attempts to reclaim him from the darkness. Frozen at the precipice, I battled within myself, torn between the primal urge to flee and an overpowering drive to reclaim my cousin from whatever malevolence held him. But fear's icy grip proved unyielding. I fled, tearing away from the spectral figure and encompassing shadows, albeit with the desperate hope that Jake was still close behind, that somehow he would emerge from the shadows and join me in the light. When I recounted our dreadful experience to the townspeople, their reactions greeted my tale with skepticism, bemused smiles often accompanied by patronizing glances. They chose to see an overzealous imagination rather than the stark truth. Jake's disappearance became another ghost story, a mystery seamlessly woven into the rich tapestry of our town's storied sanity. But I knew too well the reality of what lurked in the sinister corners of that forsaken mill, a reality that haunted my every waking moment. Even now, as I pen these recollections, the chill remains, as relentless as my enduring guilt. The whispers persist, a haunting reminder of what Jake and I stumbled upon, and the lurking malevolence that still roams the deserted echoes of days past. Tall Tim may be a name passed down through local lore, but something cold and restless lingers among those ruins, and it remembers. The memory of that day, of the terror and the loss, remains etched in my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that lies just beyond the reach of light. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. Growing up in a sleepy rural town, the summers seemed to stretch out endlessly before us, each day brimming with possibilities and the promise of adventure. Our town was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, where the days were long and filled with opportunities for exploration. My childhood companions and I were inseparable, bonded by the shared thrill of exploration and the simple joys of youthful freedom. We were like a tight-knit band of explorers, navigating the vast playground that was our town. Our playground was vast, encompassing the rolling fields and dense patches of forest that surrounded the town like a protective embrace. These natural expanses offered us countless hours of entertainment and discovery, where every tree and stream held a new secret to uncover. We would spend hours wandering through the woods, inventing stories and games that only we understood. But it was the old Johnson farmhouse at the edge of town that truly captured our imaginations and drew us in like a magnet, a mysterious beacon calling us to adventure. The farmhouse had been abandoned for as long as anyone in the town could remember. Its windows were boarded up, and its once vibrant paint had faded and peeled under the relentless sun, giving it a forlorn and forgotten look. The structure stood as a testament to time, a silent witness to the years passing by. To the adults, it was nothing more than a dilapidated structure, a relic of the past with no place in the present. They saw it as an eyesore, a decaying reminder of bygone days. But to us, it was a gateway to endless make-believe, our very own haunted house where we could play out the echoes of our dreams and fears. The mystery of the place was irresistible, and it became the setting for countless adventures in our young minds, a stage for the dramas and fantasies we concocted. We imagined it as a castle, a fortress, a place where anything was possible. One particularly hot summer, when the air hung heavy with humidity and the cicadas sang their relentless, droning song, we decided to take our games into the cool, shaded mystery of the farmhouse. There were 5 of us that day, each eager, each blissfully unaware of the secrets waiting within those crumbling walls. Our hearts were filled with anticipation, our imaginations running wild with the possibilities. We shrugged off the usual stories told by locals, tales of strange happenings and ghostly sightings, dismissing them as mere superstition. After all, what did we have to fear in our youthful bravado? We were invincible, or so we believed. The stories of ghosts and strange noises only added to the allure, making the farmhouse seem even more like a place of magic and mystery. Our plan was simple, a game of hide and seek. The thrill of this familiar game was heightened by the eerie ambience of the farmhouse, each creak of the wood and whisper of the wind weaving a tapestry of spooky delight that sent shivers down our spines. The old house seemed alive, its very walls whispering secrets as we moved through it. I volunteered to be the seeker, eager to test my friends' hiding skills and my own courage. As I counted, face pressed against the rough bark of an ancient oak in the front yard, they scattered, their laughter fading into the whispers of the forgotten house, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the anticipation of the chase. I could feel the excitement building inside me, a mix of fear and exhilaration that made my heart race. And so, with excitement bubbling in my chest, I set off to seek them out. The interior of the house was cooler than outside, a damp chill that raised goosebumps along my arms and sent a shiver down my spine. The smell of mildew and dust coated the air, disturbed by our presence and mingling with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. I found the first of my friends behind an old, moth-eaten sofa, his giggle giving him away in the otherwise silent room. Slowly, I unearthed them one by one, each hiding spot more creative than the last, until only one remained, adding to the suspense and thrill of the hunt. Each discovery was a small victory, a testament to our friendship and shared adventure. We laughed and teased each other, the camaraderie of the game bringing us closer together. It was as I crossed the threshold into what must have once been a parlor that the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air felt thicker, charged with something unseen yet tangible, wrapping around me like an invisible cloak. I called out, expecting my last friend to reveal himself with a groan at being found, but silence met my words. I listened intently, the old house settling around me with its own language of groans and sighs, but another sound emerged from the quiet, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming lightly against a window pane, breaking the silence with its persistent rhythm. It was a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, its origin a mystery. The sound was both intriguing and unsettling, drawing me deeper into the house. Curiosity piqued, I followed the sound deeper into the house, toward a hallway that disappeared into shadow, its length stretching before me like a dark tunnel. My footsteps echoed softly, mingling with the steady tap-tap-tap that grew neither louder nor softer, maintaining its eerie consistency. Something about its rhythmic nature set my nerves on edge, an uncanny reminder of a heartbeat, alive and constant. I glanced back, half expecting to see my friends behind me, but the hallway stood barren, empty except for the shadows that danced in the corners. It was as if the house itself was watching, waiting for my next move. The sense of being watched was palpable, adding to the tension and excitement. The tapping led me to a door at the back of the house. It was slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of the room beyond, inviting yet foreboding. As I nudged it open, The hinges groaned like an ancient beast stirring from slumber, the sound reverberating through the stillness. Inside, the room was empty, save for dust motes dancing lazily in the shafts of sunlight piercing through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. And still, the tapping continued, now noticeably coming from above, drawing my gaze upward with a mix of dread and curiosity. The sound seemed to beckon me, urging me to uncover its source. I felt a pull, a compulsion to follow the sound to its origin. An attic. I realized with a chill that my final friend must have climbed up there, though how I hadn't a clue. Carefully, I found the stairway, its narrow ascent curling upward into darkness like a winding path to an unknown world. Each step creaked underfoot, the noise joining the persistent tapping above, creating a symphony of suspense that echoed in the confined space. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat matching the rhythm of the tapping as I climbed. The journey up the stairs felt like a journey into another realm, a place where the rules of the ordinary world no longer applied. As I emerged into the attic, the dimness swallowed me whole, a stale darkness pressing close like a thick fog. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, to pick out the shapes of forgotten trunks and cobweb-draped rafters that filled the space. But the attic, like the room below, was empty. The tapping had stopped, leaving a silence thicker than the dust that coated every surface, a silence that seemed to hold its breath, waiting. It was a silence that felt alive, as if the very air was charged with anticipation. The stillness was almost oppressive, a tangible presence that filled the room. A whisper of movement drew my gaze to the far corner. My friend's wide eyes met mine, his face ashen, part fear and part urgency, a silent plea for understanding and action. He stood frozen, pointing toward a low window set into the gable, his finger trembling slightly. I followed his gesture, squinting into the muted light, and what I saw there stopped my heart cold, a chill running down my spine. It was a sight that defied explanation, a vision that would haunt my dreams. The moment seemed to stretch out, time slowing as the reality of what we were seeing sank in. A shadow, darker than the dim surrounding it, unspooled slowly against the window, its form amorphous yet undeniably present, like a living entity. It seemed to pulse, growing and receding, like a living inkblot against the sky, a creature of darkness and mystery. At the same moment, as if realizing it was seen, the shadow withdrew, slipping into obscurity beyond the glass, leaving us with the memory of its presence. It was as if the shadow had acknowledged us, marking our encounter as significant. The encounter left us shaken, a reminder of the mysteries that lay beyond our understanding. We didn't wait. Words were unnecessary as we rushed down the stairs, gravity doing most of the work in our haste, our feet barely touching the steps. We burst into the afternoon light, gulping the warm, fresh air like swimmers resurfacing after too long beneath the waves, the sunlight a welcome embrace. The others, having heard our panicked descent, gathered around, eyes wide with questions we couldn't answer, their curiosity mingling with our fear. The experience had bonded us, a shared secret that set us apart. We were united by what we had seen, a moment that would forever be etched in our memories. In hurried whispers, we recounted what we'd seen, a tale met with disbelief but also a latent understanding, a shared recognition of the unknown. There are things we instinctively recognize as true, fears as old as humanity itself, deep-seated in our collective consciousness. The shadow in the window became one of those for us, a shared secret, a pact of silence sealed by the enveloping warmth of the sun on our faces, a bond forged in fear and wonder. It was a moment that would linger in our memories, shaping our perceptions of the world. The experience changed us, leaving an indelible mark on our souls. The game ended that day. Our adventurous spirits dimmed slightly, shadows more than just tricks of light and imagination. Though the rest of the summer unfolded in the usual joys and mundane routines, the memory of the farmhouse lingered, veiled in a mixture of curiosity and dread, a shadow cast over our youthful innocence. It was a reminder of the boundaries we had crossed, the mysteries we had glimpsed. The farmhouse became a symbol of the unknown, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary met. Even now, years later, adulthood hasn't dulled the vividness of that summer. The recollection of our innocent game turned sinister remains a touchstone, a reminder of those boundaries better left uncrossed and the mysteries that dwell in the places forgotten by time. The footsteps echoing in the hollow, the presence at the window, are threads in the tapestry of memory, woven into the very fabric of who I am, a part of my identity that refuses to fade with time. The experience is etched in my mind, a testament to the power of imagination and the enduring allure of the unknown. It serves as a constant reminder of the magic and mystery that the world holds, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look beyond the surface. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As I sit here, trembling and filled with an unease I can hardly describe, I cannot shake the haunting memories of my days as a deep-sea diver. The recollection of my decision to leave my position at the dive company weighs heavily on my mind. A choice made not out of mere preference, but born from a profound fear and an overwhelming sense of dread that clung to me like a second skin, suffocating and relentless. The ocean, it turns out, is not just a realm of beauty and wonder, it is also a lurking horror that waits patiently in the shadows beneath the waves, a place where nightmares dwell and reality blurs into something unrecognizable. My last few dives have morphed into indistinct memories of eerie silence, each moment interrupted by bizarre phenomena that defy explanation and logic. On one of those fateful expeditions, I was tasked with investigating a series of bizarre bubbling currents that had mystified our team for weeks. These currents emerged from the depths like the breath of some great beast, twisting and dancing in a way that seemed almost alive, leading us toward the unknown. Back then, I was fueled with the thrill of discovery, my adventurous spirit eager to see what the ocean concealed, to uncover its secrets and mysteries. Little did I know that what lay beneath was far more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. As I descended deeper into the cerulean abyss, my heart raced with anticipation, the excitement of the dive mingling with a growing sense of unease. The deeper I went, the more I sensed that something was fundamentally wrong, something sinister lurking just beyond the reach of my light. The beam from my diving lamp flickered erratically, as if in sync with the strange currents that surrounded me, and the water grew colder, almost biting at my skin as if it were alive. With each foot I sank downwards, the familiar hum of the ocean faded into nothingness, replaced by a deafening silence that echoed in my ears, a silence that felt heavy and oppressive, as if the very sea itself was holding its breath. It was on this dive that I first stumbled upon what would haunt me for the rest of my life, the sunken military aircraft. Half buried in the sand, with the ocean crusting it like a forgotten tomb, was a plane that had gone missing years prior, its wings spread out like broken arms in eternal surrender to the depths. I swam closer, the eeriness intensifying with every stroke, my heart pounding in my chest. My cheap thrills turned to dread. Was I witnessing the remnants of a tragedy, or had I stumbled upon a curse that no man should encounter? The very thought sent shivers down my spine, but curiosity propelled me forward. The cockpit was caked in corrosion, the glass fogged over with the brine of the ocean's tears, obscuring whatever lay within. As I peered inside, my stomach seized with horror. There, twisted and contorted in their seats, were not just skeletons, but shadows. They moved in a way that made me question my sanity, their forms shifting and writhing as if they were caught in a nightmare of their own. Perhaps it was my mind playing tricks on me. I hadn't seen anything in the depths beyond shadows cast by my equipment, yet I was overwhelmed by a certainty that they were watching me, their hollow eyes boring into my very soul. I didn't dare to linger any longer than necessary. My heart raced as I shot back to the surface, desperation fueling my ascent, each kick of my fins propelling me upward with urgency. What followed was a conspiracy of silence among my fellow divers, whispers and uneasy glances that spoke of shared dread now etched into our very souls. The blessings of camaraderie, which once felt like a source of strength, turned into something much darker. We were haunted by what we had seen, bonding over the silence that weighed heavily in our chests, a weight that felt like a stone, unyielding and cold. The next few dives were no better. Each excursion into the depths revealed new nightmares lurking just beyond the edge of our lights. The deep was scrawled with strange markings, cryptic symbols that sent a chill racing down my spine, igniting a primal fear that I could not shake. Something watched us from the shadows, a presence that felt both ancient and malevolent. My fellow divers began to speak in hushed tones of the specters that haunted the underwater realm, a twisting, slithering shape that could manipulate the sea itself, drawing unsuspecting souls into the abyss from which there was no return. It was during a recovery operation that the darkness fully enveloped us, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. We were tasked with retrieving a submerged vessel that had gone down with all hands, a mission that filled me with dread. As we prepared for the dive, my stomach churned with anxiety, the fear gnawing at my insides. There were whispers of missing divers, of one particular man, a seasoned sailor, who had ventured down only to never return. The ocean was a mausoleum, and its secrets would rather be buried than shared with those who dared to disturb its slumber. As we descended, the water thickened, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud, each kick of our fins feeling heavier as if the very sea was trying to hold us back. The further we plummeted, the more grotesque the landscape became, like the aftermath of a great deluge, but there was something alive in that stillness, an intelligence lurking just beyond the reach of our lights, watching and waiting. In the gloom, we found him, a survivor. Clinging to the wreckage, he was reminiscent of a lost soul from another time, his eyes wild with terror and loss, reflecting the horrors he had witnessed. We pulled him aboard our recovery vessel, but he wasn't free. The flickering lights cast strange shadows on his face, and he spoke in fragmented sentences, recounting stories of dark encounters that sent shivers down my spine. I listened, heart pounding, as he recounted his tale of an entity that had spoken to him in whispers, coaxing him into the depths, promising knowledge and power but yielding only madness and despair. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, a palpable dread that seeped into our very bones. As he grappled with his reality, I caught glimpses of his past creeping into my dreams, faces of comrades lost beneath the waves, eyes wide in terror, their screams silenced by the crushing force of the ocean. The survivor's mind began to fray at the edges, revealing a deeper horror buried beneath the wreckage of his sanity. He muttered about things that moved in the darkness, ancient creatures that guarded the secrets of the abyss, their forms shifting and elusive, always just out of sight. With each passing day, whispers circulated among the crew, a growing sense of paranoia that wrapped around us like a vice. We spoke in hushed tones of the survivor's descent into madness, of unexplained phenomena that followed him like a shadow. Some claimed they saw shadows darting behind us when we sailed over sunken wrecks, strange figures that roamed the deep, watching, waiting, their intent inscrutable and terrifying. Fear seeped into our veins, a creeping dread that settled in our chests, and one fateful evening, against all better judgment, I gathered a few members of the crew and suggested we dive once more. We were resolute in our defiance of the creeping dread that had taken hold of us, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to confront the darkness that loomed over us. If we sought the secrets beneath the waves, perhaps we could gain closure for ourselves, a final truth that could explain the unseen forces at play, or at the very least, a chance to confront our fears head-on. That night, we descended into the dark, our lights flickering wildly as we reached the bottom, the darkness enveloping us like a shroud. But we pressed on, hearts racing with a mix of fear and thrill, adrenaline coursing through our veins. Suddenly, we spotted it, a colossal figure in the distance, undulating in the water, a grotesque form that seemed both alive and dead, a nightmarish vision that sent panic surging through the group. Before I could even shout a warning, chaos erupted around us. We were slipping into the turmoil of flailing limbs and desperate gasps for air. My heart thudded in my chest as I swam frantically, desperately trying to escape the unseen grip that threatened to drag me into the void. It was as if the ocean itself conspired against us, currents swirling around us like serpents while that monstrous figure loomed ever closer, a harbinger of doom. I turned to see my fellow divers tumbling into the darkness, their lights extinguished one by one, swallowed by the abyss, their screams muffled by the crushing weight of the water. The last thing I remember is the survivor's face, haunted, pleading, his eyes wide with terror as he was consumed by shadows, dragged into the depths as if the sea itself had claimed him. And then there was silence, a profound and chilling silence that enveloped me. I don't know how I made it back to the surface. I was a mere shell of my former self, gasping for breath as salty waves crashed against me, each wave a reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. I felt the pull of the abyss behind me, a dark whisper that beckoned me to return, and in that moment of clarity, I vowed never to return to the deep. The ocean was not a friend, it was a merciless beast, harboring secrets best left undisturbed, a realm of nightmares that no man should ever seek to explore. As I pen these words, I am plagued by memories that refuse to fade, a relentless tide of recollections that crash against the shores of my mind. The nightmares return, even in daylight, shadows that dance at the edge of my vision, flickering just out of reach, an echo of whispers I can never quite catch, haunting me with their promise of darkness. I fear for the others who brave the depths, who think the ocean offers solace and adventure, unaware of the truth that lurks beneath the surface, the unholy pact that lingers in those forgotten currents, the lurking specter that waits, patient and hungry, for the next soul to ensnare. I walk away from the ocean today with a scar etched deep within, a haunting reminder of the abyss that beckons, a power that remains as inscrutable as the unfathomable depths of the sea. And I know, if I ever dare to look back, I will see it waiting for me, a dark silhouette against the horizon. The ocean remembers, and it will not forget. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It all started with a strange smell wafting through my window. At first, I thought it was just the garbage from a few doors down, but as the days passed, the odor deepened, morphing into something far more sinister. It clung to the air, thick and nauseating, seeping into my clothes and twisting my stomach into knots. I couldn't escape it, no matter how tightly I shut my windows or how far I retreated into my home. The neighborhood had always been quiet, a serene suburban oasis. I used to enjoy watching my neighbors come and go, sharing idle chit-chat at the mailbox or chatting over the fence. But that warmth soon turned to unease when I noticed something odd about the Johnsons, the family that lived next door. They were normally bright and bubbly, but now they seemed withdrawn, shadows of their former selves. I often caught glimpses of them through their kitchen window, their faces pale and drawn, moving listlessly about their home. At first, I shrugged it off. Everyone goes through rough patches, I thought to myself. Maybe they were facing some personal issues I wasn't privy to. But as weeks wore on, the Johnsons' condition appeared to worsen. Their skin took on a sickly gray hue, a stark contrast to the vibrant colors they used to wear. There were days when I could have sworn I saw them sitting at the table, their mouths agape, but no food on the table and no conversations taking place. Their eyes, once lively and warm, seemed to be void of all life, like hollow pits staring into eternity. The smell grew stronger too, a rancid, putrid stench that permeated my home. I sealed my windows tightly and stocked up on air fresheners, but it did little to mask the scent that had now invaded every corner of my being. My appetite faded, and with it, My sleep became disturbed and haunted by ominous dreams. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, images of the Johnsons' gaunt faces etched into my mind. One night, desperate for fresh air, I ventured outside, only to find the street shrouded in eerie silence. The moonlight spilled over the houses, illuminating the shadows that seemed to creep and crawl towards me. Everything felt wrong, as if the world had taken a grotesque turn. My instincts screamed at me to retreat back into the safety of my home, but curiosity pulled me toward the Johnsons' door, which stood ajar as if inviting me in. Heart pounding, I stepped through the threshold. The air inside was stagnant, heavy with decay. I was met with an intense stench that clawed at my throat, forcing me to gulp back bile. The living room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tightly. It looked like no one had touched the place in months. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs hung like shrouds in the corners. I called out, my voice barely breaking the oppressive silence. "Hello? Is anyone here?" No response. I made my way deeper into the house, each creaking floorboard echoing ominously as I moved. The kitchen was next, and what I found there turned my blood to ice. The table was littered with rotting food, mold curling at the edges of once colorful dishes. Flies buzzed in thick clouds, feeding on the remains. But that wasn't the worst of it. Slumped against the wall were the Johnsons, their bodies grotesquely distorted, skin cracked and peeling as though they were decomposing right before my eyes. Panic surged through me, churning my insides like a storm. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet as I fled the scene. I reached my house, slamming the door behind me, barely able to breathe as I leaned against it, trying to dissect what I had just witnessed. Surely, it had to be a nightmare. I must have imagined it. But the lingering smell, the chill in the air, every fiber of my being screamed otherwise. Days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, my isolation grew deeper. My phone became a lifeline, yet I couldn't bring myself to call anyone. What would I say? The neighbors are decaying? I could hardly prove a point to myself, let alone anyone else. As I walked to the back of my house one morning, the Johnsons' house came into view. To my horror, it was now draped in darkness, completely vacant. Their belongings were tossed haphazardly on the lawn. It looked as if they had tried to escape, but something had stopped them, a malevolent force that hung heavy in the air. The smell had now become unbearable, a rancid reminder of the horrors next door. I decided then and there to ignore it, to pull the curtains tight and barricade myself against the outside world. I became a prisoner in my own home, feeding myself scraps of food that barely kept me alive. My dreams morphed into vivid nightmares, spinning tales of death and decay, the faces of the Johnsons haunting me every night. Weeks turned into a blur of torment. One evening, I awoke to a loud banging on my front door. The sound echoed through the emptiness of my home, jolting me upright. Heart racing, I glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. The noise continued, urgent and frantic. I hesitated, the fear wrapping its icy fingers around my heart. "Who is it?" I finally called out. Silence. I crept toward the door as the banging resumed, more desperate this time. I peered through the peephole, and my blood ran cold. It was Mr. Johnson, his face a twisted mask of agony and decay. He was barely recognizable, flesh hanging loosely, eyes sunken and vacant. "Please, help," he rasped, his voice almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight of despair. The world around me spiraled into chaos. I stumbled back, searching for a reason to justify turning him away, but I felt it, an undeniable pull to help. But what if he was no longer human? What if I let him in and found myself trapped in the very decay I had been fleeing? The decision loomed over me, one that would alter the course of my life forever. As I grappled with my thoughts, another wave of urgency crashed against the door. "We can't stay out here." You don't understand. Please, let us in. The voice was now unmistakably the soft, melodious tone of Mrs. Johnson, ghostly yet desperate. What had happened to them? I felt the walls closing in on me, the air thickening as dread consumed my senses. With trembling hands, I opened the door just a crack, peering out at the horrifying sight before me. The couple stood there, their bodies deforming and rotting, yet desperation flickered in their eyes, a glimmer of humanity fighting against the waves of decay. I was torn, fear battling with the flicker of compassion in my chest. Get inside, I blurted, almost against my will. The moment I stepped aside, they lunged in, enveloping me in an embrace that felt all at once suffocating and oddly comforting. But that feeling quickly eroded as I caught the scent of their decay, permeating the very fibers of my being. I attempted to push them away, but their grip tightened like a vice. Help us! Mr. Johnson gasped, his breath rancid and heavy. You need to know. Before he could finish, I felt a surge of sheer horror course through me as their skin began to slough off, revealing raw, rotting flesh beneath. Panic clawed at my throat. I stumbled back, mouth agape in disbelief. Get away from me! I shrieked, my voice cracking with terror. They advanced, shambling toward me, their mouths twisted into grotesque smiles that reminded me of predators closing in on their prey. I backed away, desperately searching for an escape, but the walls loomed impossibly large as they closed in on me. Please, they repeated, despair twisting into rage. Don't you see? We are rotting. You must let us help you. Join us. With no way to escape, I felt my mind begin to unravel as dark tendrils of hopelessness seeped into my soul. The ambience thickened with despair, the weight of decay pressing down upon me. I was their last lifeline, or perhaps I was to become one of them. In that moment, I realized the true horror of my existence. A gruesome transformation awaited me, emerging with the decay that had claimed my neighbors. The stench clung fiercely to my skin as the shadows of torment encircled me, a relentless reminder of the darkness that had overtaken my once peaceful life. As they advanced further, my fight-or-flight instinct kicked in. I turned and bolted toward the back door, desperation fueling my limbs. I flung it open and stumbled into the yard, the moonlight washing over me like a cleansing wave. But I could feel them behind me, the echoes of their moans trailing close. The neighborhood that had once been my sanctuary now transformed into a graveyard filled with the echoes of agony and despair. I could hear whispers of rotting bodies all around me, taunting me with the promise of decay. Desperate, I sprinted into the dense woods that bordered my backyard, seeking solace in the shadows despite the sense of inevitable doom. Each breath I took was a reminder of the Johnsons, of the smell, of the rotting world that was slowly encroaching upon me. I ran and ran until my legs could no longer carry me, collapsing at the base of an ancient tree. And there, surrounded by the whispering trees, I realized the truth. I had become a part of it. The neighbors who once lived vibrant lives had become just echoes of what they were, and now I would join them in their twilight of decay. As the darkness closed in around me, I could feel it, the decay inching along my skin, seeping into my veins, whispering promises of a haunting eternity. I stared up at the canopy of trees, letting out a final scream that echoed through the night, swallowed by the shadows of my lost neighbors. The darkness engulfed me whole, merging our fates into one entwined horror as the cycle of decay continued, infecting the world outside with the scent of despair. My story was now theirs. I had finally become part of the rotting, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most twisted horrors fester just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to answer their call. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I often find myself haunted by memories that refuse to fade, moments that cling to the edges of my mind like shadows in the dim light of dusk. They whisper to me, reminding me of the terror that lurks just beyond the veil of the ordinary, lurking in the corners of my consciousness. It all began in my childhood, a time when innocence was shattered by the inexplicable and the eerie, leaving behind a trail of fear that would follow me into adulthood. One summer evening, my friends and I decided to explore the dense woods that bordered our small town, a place filled with mystery and adventure. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, twisted shadows among the trees, transforming the familiar landscape into a realm of the unknown. As we ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, laughter echoed through the air, a sound that was soon swallowed by an unsettling silence that enveloped us like a thick fog. I remember feeling a chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off as just the cool evening air that often accompanied twilight. That's when we heard it, a low, mournful howl that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was a sound that sent shivers coursing through my veins, a primal fear that made my heart race uncontrollably. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with apprehension. My friends exchanged nervous glances, their eyes wide with fear, and one of them, trying to lighten the mood in the face of our growing dread, joked about it being a lost wolf. But deep down, we all knew it was something far worse, something that transcended our youthful imaginations. The howl echoed again, closer this time, and we bolted back toward the safety of the streetlights, the laughter forgotten in the face of our rising terror. Years later, I found myself in the city, a place that promised excitement and adventure, but ultimately delivered an overwhelming sense of isolation and loneliness. The streets were crowded with people, yet I felt utterly alone, as if I were a ghost wandering through a world that had forgotten me. One night, as I walked home from work, I sensed someone trailing behind me, an unsettling presence that sent my heart racing. The footsteps were soft but persistent, a rhythmic echo that mirrored my own hurried steps. I quickened my pace, glancing over my shoulder, but there was no one there. Just the darkened alleyways and the flickering streetlights casting an eerie glow that seemed to mock my growing anxiety. The feeling of being watched intensified with each passing day, and I could almost feel the weight of someone's gaze on my back, a suffocating presence that made my skin crawl. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just paranoia, but the sensation lingered like a dark cloud looming overhead. Days turned into weeks, and the shadow of that presence followed me everywhere, a constant reminder of the fear that had taken root in my mind. I started to avoid certain streets, taking longer routes just to feel safe, but the fear was insidious, creeping into my thoughts and twisting them into something grotesque and unrecognizable. Then there was the incident at the university, a moment that would forever alter my perception of safety. I had just finished a late-night study session in the library, the quietness of the building amplifying my solitude and making me acutely aware of my surroundings. As I made my way to my car, I noticed a figure leaning against a lamppost, shrouded in darkness, their form blending seamlessly into the night. My heart raced as I approached, the figure's face obscured by the shadows, leaving me with an unsettling sense of dread. I could feel my breath quickening, the air thick with tension, as I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light. "Hey, you dropped something," the figure called out, their voice smooth yet unsettling, sending a chill down my spine. I glanced back, but there was nothing on the ground, nothing to warrant their words. I quickened my pace, my instincts screaming at me to run, to escape this chilling encounter. The figure chuckled softly, a sound that set ice through my veins, freezing me in place. I reached my car, fumbling with the keys as I glanced over my shoulder, only to find the figure still there, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl and my heart race. I finally managed to unlock the door and slipped inside, locking it just as I heard their footsteps approach, a sound that echoed in my mind long after I had shut the door. That night, I barely slept, the figure's eyes haunting my dreams, replaying the encounter over and over in my mind. I reported the incident to campus security the next day, but they brushed it off as a harmless encounter, a misunderstanding. "You're just being paranoid," they said dismissively, but I knew better. The feeling of being hunted was all too real, a shadow that loomed over my every move, suffocating my sense of security. As the months passed, I found myself spiraling into a pit of anxiety and fear, the walls of my world closing in around me. I began to isolate myself, avoiding social gatherings and public spaces where I once felt comfortable. The world outside felt like a minefield, each step fraught with the potential for terror, each corner hiding a new threat. I started seeing a therapist, hoping to unravel the tangled mess of my thoughts and fears. But even in those sessions, I felt the weight of my experiences pressing down on me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just out of sight, waiting to pounce. Then came the night that changed everything, a turning point in my struggle against the shadows. I was home alone, the silence of the apartment amplifying my sense of dread and unease. I tried to distract myself with television, but the flickering images did little to calm my racing heart or quiet the whispers in my mind. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping at the window, a sound that sent my heart into a frenzy. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to face the sound, my body frozen in place. The window was shrouded in darkness, but I could make out a figure standing just outside, their face obscured by the night, a silhouette that filled me with dread. "Let me in," they whispered, their voice like ice scraping against metal, chilling me to the core. I was frozen in place, my mind racing with thoughts of escape and survival. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911, but the line was dead, a cruel twist of fate that left me feeling utterly helpless. Panic surged through me as I realized I was utterly alone, trapped in a cage of my own making, the walls closing in around me. The tapping grew more insistent, a rhythmic beat that matched the pounding of my heart, a sinister reminder of my vulnerability. "I know you're in there," the figure called out, their voice dripping with malice and intent. "You can't hide from me." I backed away from the window, my breath coming in shallow gasps, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. The shadows seemed to close in around me, the walls of my apartment feeling like they were closing in, suffocating me in a cocoon of fear. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the tapping stopped. Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating, wrapping around me like a shroud. I dared to approach the window, peering through the curtains, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was gone, but the sense of dread lingered, a palpable presence that refused to be shaken off, taunting me with the possibility of its return. In the days that followed, I became a prisoner in my own home, a shell of the person I once was. I installed locks on every door and window, but the feeling of safety was an illusion, a fragile facade that could shatter at any moment. I could hear whispers in the hallways, shadows moving just beyond my line of sight, a constant reminder of the threat that loomed just outside my door. My therapist suggested I confront my fears, but how could I face something that felt so real, so menacing, so determined to break me? I decided to return to the woods where it all began, hoping to reclaim a part of myself that had been lost in the shadows of my fear. I stood at the edge of the forest, the trees looming like sentinels, their branches swaying in the wind, beckoning me to enter. The memories flooded back, the laughter, the howl, the fear that had taken root in my heart. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and stepped into the darkness, determined to confront whatever lay within, to face the demons that had haunted me for so long. As I walked deeper into the woods, the familiar sense of dread washed over me like a wave, crashing against my resolve. The air grew colder, sending shivers down my spine, and the silence was deafening, amplifying the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes on me, the shadows moving just out of reach, watching and waiting. And then I heard it again, the mournful howl that had haunted my childhood, echoing through the trees, a chilling reminder of the terror I had tried to escape. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the fear that coursed through my veins. The howl grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a pull toward it, a compulsion to discover its source, to confront the fear that had defined my existence for so long. I stumbled upon a clearing, the moonlight spilling across the ground like silver, illuminating the darkness that surrounded me. In the center stood a figure, cloaked in darkness, their face still hidden from view, a silhouette that sent a jolt of recognition through me. "Why do you run?" the figure asked, their voice a haunting melody that resonated within me, echoing the questions I had long avoided. "You cannot escape what you are." I felt a wave of recognition wash over me, as if I had known this presence all along, as if it had been waiting for me to confront it. It was the embodiment of my fears, my trauma, the darkness I had tried to bury deep within myself. In that moment, I realized that running would never free me. I needed to confront the shadows, to embrace the fear that had defined my existence, to face the darkness that had clung to me like a second skin. I took a step forward, my heart racing, and the figure reached out, their hand brushing against mine, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. The world around me shifted, and I was enveloped in a whirlwind of memories, each moment of terror, each whisper of dread, all converging into a singular truth that resonated deep within me. I was not alone. The shadows were a part of me, woven into the fabric of my being, inseparable from my identity. I felt a surge of power as I accepted this truth, the fear transforming into something more, a strength that had been waiting to be acknowledged, a resilience that had been forged in the fires of my struggles. The howl faded, replaced by a sense of calm that washed over me like a gentle tide, soothing the frayed edges of my mind. When I finally emerged from the woods, the sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the landscape, illuminating the path I had traveled. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, a burden I had carried for far too long. The darkness would always be there, lurking in the corners of my mind, but I no longer feared it. I had faced my demons and emerged stronger, ready to reclaim my life and the pieces of myself that had been lost. As I walked back to my car, I knew that the echoes of my past would always linger, but they would no longer define me or dictate my actions. I was no longer a prisoner of my fears. I was a survivor, a warrior in the battle against the shadows. And in that realization, I found my freedom, a light that shone brightly in the darkness, guiding me forward into a future unshackled by the chains of my past. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It started as an ordinary day. The sun was shining brightly, and the cheerful chirping of birds filled the air outside my window. Little did I know that this seemingly normal day would soon transform into a surreal nightmare, one that would etch itself into my mind forever, haunting my thoughts and dreams. I woke up in my small, dimly lit apartment, situated in a rundown part of the city where the buildings seemed to sag under the weight of their own history. I often felt a sense of dread emanating from the walls, as if they were alive with secrets whispered in the crackling paint, but today felt different. Today, the air was thick with an unshakable tension that clung to me like a shroud. The news had been buzzing with reports of a dangerous criminal who had escaped from the nearby penitentiary. They described him vividly, a man with wild, unkempt hair, piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul, and a smile that sent chills down my spine, one that promised nothing but malice. He was convicted of heinous crimes, of which I dared not recount, as the very thought made my stomach churn. The authorities warned everyone to stay indoors, to lock our doors tightly, and to remain vigilant. But like anyone else, I felt an illusion of safety within my four walls, believing I was just a spectator in this unfolding horror, detached from the reality outside. As evening crept in, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across my living room. The shadows danced unsettlingly across the walls, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to taunt me. A strange noise broke my concentration, a faint scratching sound, almost like a distant whisper beckoning to me from the depths of the night. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just the wind, a figment of my overactive imagination. Hours passed, and my unease morphed into a suffocating paranoia. Every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified, echoing through the silence of the night like a harbinger of doom. I decided to distract myself by watching television, but even the flickering images on the screen failed to quell the apprehension brewing within me. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from my friend Sarah, urging me to stay safe and check the locks. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but those words lingered in my mind, turning the faint scratching into an invisible clawing at my sanity. As I reluctantly made my way to the door, I noticed that the scratching had intensified, a persistent reminder that I wasn't alone in this suffocating darkness. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness, a void that seemed to swallow the light. I hesitated, my heart racing as I fought against the instinct to flee. I unlocked the door just enough to peek outside, but the hallway was empty, an ominous silence hanging in the air. I stepped back, shaken, yet I felt an inexplicable urge to confront whatever lurked in the shadows, to face the fears that threatened to consume me. Minutes turned into hours, and I found myself pacing back and forth, anxiety pulsing through my veins like a relentless tide. I hadn't heard any news regarding the escaped convict, and a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if he was nearby, lurking in the shadows, watching me? But logic told me that was unlikely. I forced myself to sit down, trying to regain control over my racing thoughts, when suddenly the power flickered and went out, plunging me into complete darkness, as if the world had turned off its lights. With the last remnants of light fading, a gnawing fear settled in my stomach, twisting like a knife. I fumbled for my phone, using its dim glow to navigate my way to the living room window. I peered out into the night, hoping to see some tranquility in the world outside, a semblance of normalcy. Instead, all I saw were the eerie silhouettes of trees swaying like specters in a ghostly dance, their branches clawing at the sky. Then, I heard it again, the scratching. This time it was louder, scratching against the wall right outside my apartment, a sound that felt like icy fingers dragging across my skin. My breath hitched in my throat as I squeezed my phone tightly, the flickering light illuminating faces of the past, unknown victims, their hollow eyes staring back at me, recounting their unspeakable tales of horror and despair. I had always been fascinated by horror stories, captivated by the darkness of the human soul. And now, I was a living spectator of my own terror, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. An oppressive silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. My instincts screamed at me to call for help, but a haunting whisper in my mind urged me to stay quiet, to remain still, to hide from whatever was coming. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving at the edge of the window. It was fleeting, but unmistakable. My heart pounded, my body was frozen in fear, paralyzed by the unknown. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the coffee table in my haste. I heard another sound, a muffled whisper that sent shivers down my spine. My mind conjured images of the escaped convict, the sinister smile etched across his face, a visage that haunted my thoughts. I imagined him lurking just outside my home, waiting for the opportune moment to strike, to shatter my fragile sense of safety. And then the door rattled. It echoed through the hall like thunder, a sound that reverberated deep within my bones. A primal fear surged within me. I had to get out. But where would I go? Every instinct told me to hide, to remain silent and invisible. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath as if it would shield me from the impending doom. My thoughts flashed back to the stories I had read, the nightmarish tales of those who fell victim to the darkest depths of humanity, their fate sealed by their own fears. The door rattled again, more forcefully this time, as if the very hinges were screaming in pain, protesting against the invader. I heard footsteps now, heavy and deliberate, creeping down the hallway, drawing closer to my sanctuary. Terror rooted me in place, urging me to confront my fears or flee into the night. In a fleeting moment of courage, I reached for the kitchen knife. The cold steel felt reassuring in my grasp, a false sense of security against the horrors that awaited me. My breath came in shallow gasps. I could hear my heartbeat reverberating in my ears as I approached the door, each thud echoing like a drumroll of fate. A cacophony of violent banging erupted. The door trembled under the assault. Was it going to give way? Adrenaline coursed through my veins, propelling me forward. I turned the lock, twisting it with trembling hands, but I knew it wouldn't hold forever. I couldn't let fear consume me. I had to confront whatever was waiting for me on the other side, to face the darkness head-on. With a deep breath, I flung the door open, knife raised, prepared to face my nightmare. The hallway was empty, eerily quiet, but something felt off, like the calm before a storm. The air was thick with an unsettling presence that clung to me like a fog. I stepped out cautiously, scanning my surroundings. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I moved further from the safety of my home, each step feeling like a descent into madness. And then I saw it, the shadow darting around the corner, hauntingly familiar, as if it were a piece of my own psyche. I chased the silhouette, driven by a primal instinct to understand this terror that had taken root in my mind. As I rounded the corner, I was met with a sight that caused my heart to drop into my stomach. A figure cloaked in darkness, eyes glinting with malice, a reflection of my deepest fears. The escaped convict? But as I stepped closer, clarity emerged from the abyss. It wasn't a person at all. It was a twisted reflection of my own fears, a manifestation of my own mind unraveling in the face of terror. The figure morphed into images of the people I had read about, their torment painted across my subconscious, their screams echoing in my ears. I was staring into the abyss, feeling lost in a labyrinth of horror, unable to find my way back to sanity. I stumbled backward, but the darkness closed in around me, swallowing my light. The whispers rose to a cacophony, each one laced with tragedy and despair, a symphony of sorrow that threatened to consume me whole. My mind crackled under the weight of their agony, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. I clawed at my head, desperate to silence them, to regain control over my spiraling thoughts. Just when I thought I had succumbed to the madness, another surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. I turned and ran, clutching the knife tightly as if it would slice through the veil of darkness that enveloped me. I tore through the apartment complex, heart racing, a survivor escaping my own horror show, a frantic flight from the demons that haunted me. I burst out of the entrance, gasping for breath, the starlit skies above me a stark contrast to the darkness I had just fled. But even as I collapsed outside, the scratching followed me, a reminder that the abyss would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment to reclaim me. I could never escape the darkness. It was now a part of me, forever entwined with my existence, a shadow that would never fade. No more tales of horror could ever compare to my own. I learned that night that the true terror didn't exist in the horror stories of others. It lived within us, waiting for the right moment to emerge, to remind us of the fragility of sanity, to show us that we are all but a whisper away from our own nightmares. The laughter of the shadows echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder that I was both the observer and the observed in this twisted tale of human darkness, forever trapped in a cycle of fear and despair. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It started as an ordinary day. The sun was shining brightly, and the cheerful chirping of birds filled the air outside my window. Little did I know that this seemingly normal day would soon transform into a surreal nightmare, one that would etch itself into my mind forever, haunting my thoughts and dreams. I woke up in my small, dimly lit apartment, situated in a rundown part of the city where the buildings seemed to sag under the weight of their own history. I often felt a sense of dread emanating from the walls, as if they were alive with secrets whispered in the crackling paint, but today felt different. Today, the air was thick with an unshakable tension that clung to me like a shroud. The news had been buzzing with reports of a dangerous criminal who had escaped from the nearby penitentiary. They described him vividly, a man with wild, unkempt hair, piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul, and a smile that sent chills down my spine, one that promised nothing but malice. He was convicted of heinous crimes, of which I dared not recount, as the very thought made my stomach churn. The authorities warned everyone to stay indoors, to lock our doors tightly, and to remain vigilant. But like anyone else, I felt an illusion of safety within my four walls, believing I was just a spectator in this unfolding horror, detached from the reality outside. As evening crept in, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across my living room. The shadows danced unsettlingly across the walls, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to taunt me. A strange noise broke my concentration, a faint scratching sound, almost like a distant whisper beckoning to me from the depths of the night. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just the wind, a figment of my overactive imagination. Hours passed, and my unease morphed into a suffocating paranoia. Every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified, echoing through the silence of the night like a harbinger of doom. I decided to distract myself by watching television, but even the flickering images on the screen failed to quell the apprehension brewing within me. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from my friend Sarah, urging me to stay safe and check the locks. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but those words lingered in my mind, turning the faint scratching into an invisible clawing at my sanity. As I reluctantly made my way to the door, I noticed that the scratching had intensified, a persistent reminder that I wasn't alone in this suffocating darkness. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness, a void that seemed to swallow the light. I hesitated, my heart racing as I fought against the instinct to flee. I unlocked the door just enough to peek outside, but the hallway was empty, an ominous silence hanging in the air. I stepped back, shaken, yet I felt an inexplicable urge to confront whatever lurked in the shadows, to face the fears that threatened to consume me. Minutes turned into hours, and I found myself pacing back and forth, anxiety pulsing through my veins like a relentless tide. I hadn't heard any news regarding the escaped convict, and a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if he was nearby, lurking in the shadows, watching me? But logic told me that was unlikely. I forced myself to sit down, trying to regain control over my racing thoughts, when suddenly, the power flickered and went out, plunging me into complete darkness, as if the world had turned off its lights. With the last remnants of light fading, a gnawing fear settled in my stomach, twisting like a knife. I fumbled for my phone, using its dim glow to navigate my way to the living room window. I peered out into the night, hoping to see some tranquility in the world outside, a semblance of normalcy. Instead, all I saw were the eerie silhouettes of trees swaying like specters in a ghostly dance, their branches clawing at the sky. Then, I heard it again, the scratching. This time it was louder, scratching against the wall right outside my apartment, a sound that felt like icy fingers dragging across my skin. My breath hitched in my throat as I squeezed my phone tightly, the flickering light illuminating faces of the past, unknown victims, their hollow eyes staring back at me, recounting their unspeakable tales of horror and despair. I had always been fascinated by horror stories, captivated by the darkness of the human soul. And now, I was a living spectator of my own terror, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. An oppressive silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. My instincts screamed at me to call for help, but a haunting whisper in my mind urged me to stay quiet, to remain still, to hide from whatever was coming. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving at the edge of the window. It was fleeting, but unmistakable. My heart pounded, my body was frozen in fear, paralyzed by the unknown. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the coffee table in my haste. I heard another sound, a muffled whisper that sent shivers down my spine. My mind conjured images of the escaped convict, the sinister smile etched across his face, a visage that haunted my thoughts. I imagined him lurking just outside my home, waiting for the opportune moment to strike, to shatter my fragile sense of safety. And then the door rattled. It echoed through the hall like thunder, a sound that reverberated deep within my bones. A primal fear surged within me. I had to get out. But where would I go? Every instinct told me to hide, to remain silent and invisible. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath as if it would shield me from the impending doom. My thoughts flashed back to the stories I had read, the nightmarish tales of those who fell victim to the darkest depths of humanity, their fate sealed by their own fears. The door rattled again, more forcefully this time, as if the very hinges were screaming in pain, protesting against the invader. I heard footsteps now, heavy and deliberate, creeping down the hallway, drawing closer to my sanctuary. Terror rooted me in place, urging me to confront my fears or flee into the night. In a fleeting moment of courage, I reached for the kitchen knife. The cold steel felt reassuring in my grasp, a false sense of security against the horrors that awaited me. My breath came in shallow gasps. I could hear my heartbeat reverberating in my ears as I approached the door, each thud echoing like a drumroll of fate. A cacophony of violent banging erupted. The door trembled under the assault. Was it going to give way? Adrenaline coursed through my veins, propelling me forward. I turned the lock, twisting it with trembling hands, but I knew it wouldn't hold forever. I couldn't let fear consume me. I had to confront whatever was waiting for me on the other side, to face the darkness head-on. With a deep breath, I flung the door open, knife raised, prepared to face my nightmare. The hallway was empty, eerily quiet, but something felt off, like the calm before a storm. The air was thick with an unsettling presence that clung to me like a fog. I stepped out cautiously, scanning my surroundings. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I moved further from the safety of my home, each step feeling like a descent into madness. And then I saw it, the shadow darting around the corner, hauntingly familiar, as if it were a piece of my own psyche. I chased the silhouette, driven by a primal instinct to understand this terror that had taken root in my mind. As I rounded the corner, I was met with a sight that caused my heart to drop into my stomach. A figure cloaked in darkness, eyes glinting with malice, a reflection of my deepest fears. The escaped convict? But as I stepped closer, clarity emerged from the abyss. It wasn't a person at all. It was a twisted reflection of my own fears, a manifestation of my own mind unraveling in the face of terror. The figure morphed into images of the people I had read about, their torment painted across my subconscious, their screams echoing in my ears. I was staring into the abyss, feeling lost in a labyrinth of horror, unable to find my way back to sanity. I stumbled backward, but the darkness closed in around me, swallowing my light. The whispers rose to a cacophony, each one laced with tragedy and despair, a symphony of sorrow that threatened to consume me whole. My mind crackled under the weight of their agony, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. I clawed at my head, desperate to silence them, to regain control over my spiraling thoughts. Just when I thought I had succumbed to the madness, another surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. I turned and ran, clutching the knife tightly as if it would slice through the veil of darkness that enveloped me. I tore through the apartment complex, heart racing, a survivor escaping my own horror show, a frantic flight from the demons that haunted me. I burst out of the entrance, gasping for breath, the starlit skies above me a stark contrast to the darkness I had just fled. But even as I collapsed outside, the scratching followed me, a reminder that the abyss would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment to reclaim me. I could never escape the darkness. It was now a part of me, forever entwined with my existence, a shadow that would never fade. No more tales of horror could ever compare to my own. I learned that night that the true terror didn't exist in the horror stories of others. It lived within us, waiting for the right moment to emerge, to remind us of the fragility of sanity, to show us that we are all but a whisper away from our own nightmares. The laughter of the shadows echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder that I was both the observer and the observed in this twisted tale of human darkness, forever trapped in a cycle of fear and despair. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away.